You know exactly who you are. You're sharp, you're capable, you say what needs to be said. Until a certain person walks into the room, or a certain meeting starts, or you're in a certain room, and something in you shrinks. And this isn't about confidence in general. You have that. It's specific, it's situational. It happens around certain people in certain rooms and almost nowhere else. And today I'm going to show you the difference between adapting on purpose and shrinking out of shame, and how to know which one you're actually doing. Hi, I'm Kim Welcome. And for almost 20 years, I've worked at the intersection of communication, identity, and leadership, advising, coaching, and consulting women across government, corporate, and nonprofit in more than 20 different countries. And along the way, I've watched capable women moderate themselves into invisibility around certain people or in certain rooms, not because they lack the skill to hold their own, but because somewhere along the way they confused adapting with disappearing. This channel is for the ones who get it done, the ones who are holding it down, the ones everyone relies on, and the ones who are ready to close the gap between how much they give and how little they're recognized or even respected. We give you real tools and frameworks here, but also we do the deeper work, because frameworks alone don't move you if your identity hasn't caught up. Subscribe and stay with me. Now, let's be clear about something first. Not all adaptation is shrinking. Being able to walk into any room and communicate effectively, reading the room, adjusting your tone, your pace, your entry point, that's a skill. That's range. And it's one of the most valuable things that you can bring anywhere. The problem isn't that you change depending on who's in the room. Almost everyone does that to some degree. The problem is why you're changing. I've seen this play out a few different ways, and I want to walk you through them because the differences matter. I worked with a young professional who muted her signature style, her energy, her natural way of showing up, because she was afraid it would confirm a stereotype she already knew people held about her, or she thought they held about her. She didn't make a conscious decision to hold back. It happened slowly, meeting after meeting, until the version of her that showed up at work barely resembled the version of her everywhere else. That wasn't range, that was fear making the decision for her, one retreat at a time. I worked with a Colombian professional woman living here in the United States, who found herself coaching her own sisters to lower their voices and soften how they carried themselves, and genuinely believing she was protecting them. But what she was actually passing down was internalized shame dressed up as guidance. She had learned somewhere along the way that taking up space was dangerous, and she was teaching her sisters to believe the same thing out of love without realizing that's what she was doing. That's the way she was conducting herself in professional spaces. And then there's a very different example, a Nigerian manager I worked with who came from a culture where in management they're very direct. They even raise their voices when they give a directive. But when he moved to the Bahamas, that landed very differently than he intended. It was read as harsh in a culture that values a softer, more relational approach to leadership. So he adjusted, and he learned to lead with more warmth up front, to build relationship before delivering direction. And here's the distinction that matters. He didn't lose himself in the adjustment. He expanded his toolkit. He still led, he still made hard calls. He just learned a second way to do it, depending on the room he was in. Three people, three different situations, but only one of them was actually growing. The other two were disappearing and calling it adaptation. So, how do you know which one you're doing? Ask yourself this question honestly. Am I adjusting what I lead with, or am I erasing who I am? Range flexes your tone, it adjusts your pacing. It changes where you start the conversation and how much context you give before you get to your point. Shrinking does something different. It erases your opinions before you've even fully formed them. It softens your truth so far past the point of recognition that by the time it leaves your mouth, it isn't really your truth anymore. It makes you disappear in increments so small that you don't notice until one day you look up and you realize no one in the room actually knows you. And here's another way to tell the difference: range feels like a choice. Even in the moment, some part of you knows you're making a strategic decision about how you show up. But shrinking doesn't feel like a choice, it feels automatic. It feels like relief, the relief of not being seen, not being tested, not being questioned. And that relief is the telltale sign. Growth really feels like belief. It usually feels like a little bit of risk. And one of these expands you in the room, and the other removes you from it quietly while you're still standing there. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this, if there's a certain person, a certain room where you consistently disappear instead of adapt, I want you to take a few minutes to take my Close the Gap assessment. It's a short, honest look at where the gap actually is for you between how much you give and how you're actually being seen and recognized. It's free, and it's the first step in understanding exactly what's happening in those rooms where you shrink. The link is in the description below. I'm Kim Welcome. Communication is the skill, identity is the power. I'll see you next week.